Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 2025 meeting of the Metropolitan Washington Old Time Radio Club. And it's delightful to see so many of you here. And do we have any people who've never been with us before that we can greet with warmth and vigor? I'm not seeing any hands. So if you are new and you haven't been with us before, welcome. Welcome, Dr. Lona Bailey, will be our presenter tonight. That's very exciting for us. And John Abbott will do our first 15. So before John gets started with his first 15, I encourage all of you to mute yourselves. If you don't, I can. But then it's harder for you to unmute. So here we are. This is wonderful. I'm seeing faces I haven't seen for quite a while. So this is a tremendous trail. Oh my goodness, here we are. So without further ado, because we have a certain amount on the schedule for tonight, John, would you like to get us started with your Johnny Dollar audio?
Yes.
I'm intrigued.
If you will make me
I will make
in a deified state.
Thank you for the the prompting. I really appreciate it. Okay. John Abbott is co-host.
Okay. All right. Where is my?
What are you looking for?
Trying to figure out how to share my screen. It's changed again.
It's at the bottom and it's no longer outlined in green. So it looks like any other button on your on that
yeah, I've got to share.
That's it. That's
icon.
What you use. Tap
I
that.
guess it's advanced sharing options.
No, it should just say share either your screen, photos, iCloud, etc., etc.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's been more than 15 or 20 minutes, so
you're fine, John.
Everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
And
perfect.
Going to minimize that. Okay, tonight we're going to have a little presentation that I'm calling Johnny Dollar and the Middle East Mystery Matters. Before we start getting into the meat of the issue here, I thought I would tease you with a little bit of audio from these new recordings.
ارادتمند جانی دالر.
نقشه شیطانی، نوشته اسدالله شهریاری.
Okay, let's go back and listen to part of that again.
ارادتمند جانی دالر.
Yes. You're not having a problem with Zoom. And Zoom is working absolutely swimmingly. And you're not having a problem with your hearing. You're hearing everything exactly correctly. And yes, the speaker did say Johnny Dollar, but he said it in Persian. This is something that I've recently gained access to some information that really has proved that something I thought was an unfounded rumor was true. Namely that Johnny Dollar was very popular in Iran back in the good old days, back when we were buddy. They liked our music, they liked our movies, liked our clothes, they liked our weapon systems, we liked their oil. So, it was a different time. And there's a very interesting story behind tonight's presentation. Back in August of last year, I almost said this year, I got an email from my publisher. Said the Associated Press wants to talk to you about Johnny Dollar. Well, Pulitzer Prize, what are they after here? So chapter one of this story is back in the good old days, where I was contacted John Gambrell, who is a news director for the Gulf and Iran branch of the Associated Press in Doha, United Arab Emirates. We had a very interesting discussion about Johnny Dollar in the old days, American old days, and the Iranian old days, and a new version of Johnny Dollar, which is being broadcast in Iran today. Now, looking back at the pre-revolutionary Johnny Dollar in Iran, it was probably one of the most popular radio programs on Radio Iran. Listeners, they listened for the phone to ring, and they listened for the speaker to say, "Sincerely, Johnny Dollar." Now, their Johnny Dollar was a little bit different from ours because each episode was focused around a murder case, and Johnny Dollar was a police detective, not an insurance investigator. There was no expense account. And it was voiced by a very popular Iranian actor named Haydar Saremi, or words to that effect. And his mission was to figure out who done it. And at the end of the program, a question was raised as to how did he figure it out? And the listeners were encouraged to write in and explain what helped Johnny Dollar to solve the case. And the winner would receive a watch. There's a website which we'll talk about in a moment or two, and there are some very positive comments about the old series. They brightened their Saturday nights. The streets were deserted when Johnny Dollar was on. It was one of the most fascinating radio shows of its time, and very famous people played roles. I don't think that any of those are CBS actors, but it was very popular at its time in Iran. Now, the one thing that I saw on the site here was they were claiming that this was from the 1930s to the 1960s. I don't know. I just reports what I sees, because we all know that the American Johnny Dollar didn't start until 1949 and was over by 62. So who knows? Now, I did find a screen on or a YouTube presentation on YouTube, which has these two gentlemen. Haydar Saremi is on the right. He was the voice of Johnny Dollar, no doubt a little bit younger than he is in the picture. And Hamid Amele was his sergeant, Sergeant Walsh. Now, there were some other differences in the program. The music for this series was composed by Gene Sibelius, a Finnish composer. There are interludes which are very James Bond, the jazzy riff of an early James Bond movie, which is nothing like what we had in the American Johnny Dollar. And there is an archive available of 6 episodes from the early 1960s version of Johnny Dollar on the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran radio station. Now, chapter 2 of our little story here is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. We know that in 1979, things changed a little bit. We were no longer buddies. Everybody was trying to do their best to distance themselves from anything about the West. But this quote is quite applicable because there is a new series of Johnny Dollar being broadcast, and makes one wonder why a hardline regime would broadcast a program about an American detective who smokes, drinks, and likes women. Excuse me. To quote Yul Brynner in The King and I, is a puzzlement. Now, according to the AP article, it's not really exactly clear why they decided to bring back Johnny Dollar. And maybe it just harkens back to an era when we all enjoyed closer relations. And the new episodes introduced the younger generations to a character that their parents, grandparents were probably very fond of. And again, 3 gunshots, Johnny Dollar answering a telephone. These were things that the older generation of Iranians remember very well. It also pointed out that this one person remembers listening on a vacuum radio tube, a vacuum tube radio. Say that 10 times real quick. Says, we did not have any worries except guessing how Johnny Dollar would find the murderer. Johnny Dollar seems to have passed a test with the state-run Islamic radio broadcast, but they still haven't explained their reasoning for allowing it on the air. The best thing that the gentleman who wrote the AP article could come up with is that they were trying to attract younger listeners to radio broadcasts. And again, people remember hearing about Johnny Dollar from their father, their grandfather, and even younger 20 and 30-year-old students of today are familiar with the program. And not everything is Skittles and beer, as they say. There's a quote in the AP article about this one taxi driver who was not too happy with the programming. I will call the radio station to ask them to stop the unpleasant program. So I don't know whether he had any influence or not, but one of the things that really piqued my interest was Mr. Gamble forwarded to me links to the old programs, which, I have a link for here. And don't worry about writing it down. I'm going to put comments in the Zoom link. And when we post the YouTube video, links to these sites will be there as well. And you can see that unless you speak Farsi, you're not going to get very much. However, if you use Microsoft Windows, their Edge browser, and Google, it will translate the text of the screens from Farsi into English. Obviously, the one graphic there is a picture, and it won't do anything about that. Now, one of the things that I did some research. It does not work on any other browser on Windows. It doesn't work on iOS or Mac OS. Only on Microsoft Windows Edge will it give you a translation. Now, this one particular program that I downloaded and we got the beginning of, I ran these audio programs through an artificial intelligence program, which would translate it from Farsi to English. And on one of the programs, it did a pretty darn good job. It talks about, Johnny Dollar investigating a murder involving Suzanne and Peter. And apparently there's money, property, and motives. And it points out that it was likely a scripted performance rather than an actual meeting. Uh, so that artificial intelligence stuff's pretty good sometimes. Sometimes. Now there is a link to a new set of programs. There are, I think, like 12 different programs in the new set. There's a link to those. Again, I ran through Microsoft Edge and Google, translated it, and this particular one talks about Johnny Dollar and Walsh, his assistant, are at a restaurant. Fight breaks out, and it unveils a murder that has been kept secret for a long time. Yeah, I really wish I could have gotten an entire translation of it. And I tried. I contacted the local university down here, asking if they had anybody that spoke Farsi on their staff, and they did not. They referred me to a professor at Duke University who was born in Iran and who taught Farsi related subjects. Still waiting for a response. So this is the text of that I got on the website, and it talks about the writer, the directors, the speakers, and whatnot. Now it's very interesting on this second program, uh, just like the first one. Johnny Dollar introduces himself, but at the very beginning of the program, uh, I can pick out uh, the announcer is introducing the various different speakers, the actors, and everything is going along in Farsi until he mentions the name Jack Newman. Now, those who are familiar with Johnny Dollar know that E. Jack Newman was a writer on the original Johnny Dollar program, but by the time this thing came about, he's obviously deceased. So, again, I really wish I could have figured out what was going on there. Now, we'll also in the comments have links to the AP article. You can see there's a picture of a gentleman there, 73 years old, still working on his vacuum tube radios, keeping those alive and humming. So, in conclusion, and this is probably the favorite slide for every presentation that I get, these programs prove what I have said for almost 25 years. Johnny Dollar is the Energizer Bunny of old-time radio. He just keeps going and going and going. And with that, I'm going to get going and turn the program back to Wendy.
Thank you very much, John. That was fascinating. Really, really interesting stuff. Well, really excellently well done. Does anyone have any questions, curiosities, or observations for Dennis has his hand up before I even finish the sentence. Go ahead, Dennis. Dennis Stevens.
John, I know a doctor who is Armenian, and he also speaks Farsi. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I'll check with him to see if he can. He speaks it and reads it. He was born in Iran, but he is Armenian. I'll talk to him and see if he's able to help you out.
Yeah, I mean, like I've got two programs. They run approximately 30 minutes each. And, just out of curiosity, if nothing else, I'd really like to figure out what was going on there. I know, like in the newest one, they talk about, what was it, the United Bank of California, and $3 million is mentioned. So, yeah, obviously Johnny Dollar is not being paid $3 million, but it would be interesting to find out. So, if he's interested, shoot me an email and we'll see what happens.
I have a question, John. Thank you for the presentation. My question is, do you know if Johnny Dollar was the only show they were getting, or, I mean, obviously they were contacting you because with the Johnny Dollar, but was that as far as you know, is that the only radio show that Iranians were listening to?
That's the only American themed broadcast that I'm aware of. Now, the person at Associated Press, he has an associate there, and they're in contact with these folks all the time. They're probably listening to the radio, and if there was anything else that was being broadcast, I'm sure that he'd let me know. But it was very curious that Johnny Dollar, of all the American radio programs, piqued their curiosity.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of it. Is this sort of with two countries that don't get along, it's this sort of a connection,
Yes.
Some sort of a cultural shared enjoyment. So thank you.
Yeah, and back in the old days, it was a very logical connection. Today, like I say, is a puzzlement. Bert, did you have a question there?
Yeah, I did. Could you expand more on your interaction with the AP correspondent? I mean, what questions did he ask you, and are you quoted in any sort of an article that could be downloaded and read?
Yeah. The article that I'll put in the comments, there is a link to the article, and yours truly is quoted. And somebody else who neither I or Joe Webb have ever heard of is quoted as well. But it was basically like, what made Johnny Dollar so popular that he was on the air for so long? And so I just, I tried to keep the conversation under 3 days, because I can talk forever about Johnny Dollar. And he wanted to try and figure out, well, okay, it was popular in America, but what was it that would make it popular in Iran? Even though they did change the premise of it, got rid of the insurance investigator, made him a police officer, gave him an assistant, and yeah, I think there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but I'm not going to hop on a plane to Tehran anytime soon. Plus, somebody else is paying for it, of course, and can guarantee my return.
Oh, I was struck by the fact that the soundtrack, the music, and all that was completely different for the Iranian broadcasts, and I thought that was an interesting thing. I mean, it's sort of like they take the name Johnny Dollar, sounds like to me, and then they sort of use that, but then make their whole new show, really.
Yeah, another thing that I actually listen to these things, which is kind of, mind numbing to listen to 30 minutes of, people speaking a language that you don't understand. One of the things that I noticed was there seemed to be a rather audible sound of pages being turned. So I guess they haven't learned how to hold their script and drop pages on the floor like, we did back in the old days, or like we did down at Culpeper. But, oh, well.
John, I have a question.
Yes.
Johnny Dollar, in some of the episodes of, the U.S. version of Johnny Dollar, it says, the other police would get on Johnny and say, remember your days as a detective in the New York Police Department. So it's interesting that, the Iranian version is him as a detective. It's, Johnny Dollar before he was an insurance investigator.
Yeah, that's possible. But Johnny Dollar's police credentials, yeah, probably took like maybe 5 lines of scripts over, 12 years or so. It really wasn't a major aspect of it. But the Iranian guy, he's a police officer, and there's no expense account. He has an assistant, and like I say, it's totally different. I'm presuming you can't understand most of it, but
Does anyone else have any questions or observations? Oh, well, excellently well done,
My picture
John.
came back.
now, did I keep it under 15 minutes?
I'm going to mute the Whipples. Well, they've done it themselves. Okay, great. So I think it's that happy time when we go to our quiz. And Sally Stevens had some situation at school that she had to deal with. I think that this week has been a little bit challenging for her. So Lauren Kraut has very kindly volunteered to stand in for her and read the questions and read the answers. And Lauren, I have made you a co-host, which should give you the keys to the kingdom to launch this the questions, the quiz, and you usually find that under more, and it says polls/quizzes, and you just tap on that, and I could actually launch it for you if it makes it easier.
Do you
got
see
it?
Do you see it?
Nope.
No.
Oh, Dennis
Wait.
sees it?
I see it.
Has anyone popped up?
I see it.
Okay, success.
Well, does everyone see
Does
it?
everybody, Wendy?
Because I seem to be the only person who's not seeing
It pops
it.
up as a
okay.
separate window.
Do you still have me as a co-host?
Yeah, but that doesn't affect it.
Oh, yes, it does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got in
I
a whole load of trouble, programs ago because
Okay, well, I will take away your privileges, John, because you've done your thing. All right. So
Okay.
I still.
Are you ready?
Well,
I
try to start it again.
Okay, I'm going to end it and then I'm going to start it again. Okay, ready?
Relaunch it and see if that makes a difference. And otherwise, when I go to polls, it'll come up.
Okay. Back.
You've gone to. Have you gone to share screen?
Oh, there we go. I got it. I got it.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So everybody's cool.
Does everybody see the poll now?
Well, copacetic at least.
Okay. Go for it, Lauren. Thank you very much for standing in at the last minute.
Of course. Great. And thank you for asking me, and happy Friday, everybody. Big shoes to fill here, so fingers crossed. So our theme tonight is Ooh La La, Gal Pals. Our first question on Casey, crime photographer. Casey had a gal pal reporter named Annie. The police chief always referred to her as Miss Blank. That's the question. What was Anne's surname? A, Willis, B, Williams, C, Wilson, or D, Wismer? On Casey, crime photographer, Casey had a gal pal reporter named Annie. The police chief always referred to her as Miss Blank. That's the question. What was Annie's surname? A, Willis, B, Williams, C, Wilson, or D, Wismer? I can actually hear that one in my head. So number 2, Ellen Deering was Philo Vance's gal pal. Who played Ellen in the Jackson Beck-led series? A, Jan Miner, B, Jeanette Nolan, C, Joan Banks, or D, Joan Alexander? Ellen Dearing was Philo Vance's gal pal. Who played Ellen in the Jackson Beck-led series? A. Jan Miner, B. Jeanette Nolan, C. Joan Banks, or D. Joan Alexander? And if I'm going too fast, let me know. Number 3. Richard Diamond had a gal pal, Helen, who was attractive, wealthy, and had a Park Avenue apartment. What was Helen's surname? A. Ashley, B. Ashcan, C. Asher, or D. Archer? Richard Diamond had a gal pal, Helen, who was attractive, wealthy, and had a Park Avenue apartment. What was Helen's surname? A. Ashley, B. Ashcan, C. Asher, or D. Archer? Okay, number 4. Lamont Cranston only had one gal pal on The Shadow, but over time the part was played by 6 actresses. Who of the following was never Margot Lane? A. Virginia Gregg, B. Gertrude Warner, C. Grace Matthews, or D. Leslie Woods? Lamont Cranston only had one gal pal on The Shadow, but over time the part was played by 6 actresses. Who of the following was never Margot Lane? A. Virginia Gregg, B. Gertrude Warner, C. Grace Matthews, or D. Leslie Woods? All right, number 5. As editor of Big Town's Illustrated Press, Steve Wilson's gal pal and star reporter Lorelai Kilbourne was played by several actresses. Which one played the part for 10 years? A. Claire Trevor, B. Una Munson, C. Fran Carlin, or D. Hilary Brooke? As editor of Big Town's Illustrated Press, Steve Wilson's gal pal and star reporter Lorelai Kilbourne was played by several actresses. Which one played the part for 10 years? A. Claire Trevor, B. Una Munson, C. Fran Carlin, or D. Hilary Brooke? Number 6. We all know that Irma was a gal pal of boyfriend Al. Jane also had a boyfriend who often bailed Al and Irma out of a jam. What was his name? A. Stephen Highlander, B. Eric Suslander, C. Edward Marslander, or D. Richard Rhinelander? We all know that Irma was the gal pal of boyfriend Al. Jane also had a boyfriend who often bailed Al and Irma out of a jam. What was his name? A. Stephen Highlander, B. Eric Suslander, C. Edward Marslander, or D. Richard Rhinelander? Number 7. Dennis Day liked to remind Jack Benny that he had 2 shows. On a day in the life of Dennis Day, he had a gal pal. What was her name? A. Betty Miles, B. Mildred Anderson, C. Sharon Douglas, or D. Tempest Storm? Whew. Dennis Day liked to remind Jack Benny that he had 2 shows. On a day in the life of Dennis Day, he had a gal pal. What was her name? A. Betty Miles, B. Mildred Anderson, C. Sharon Douglas, or D. Tempest Storm? Number 8. In his short-lived program, Honest Harold, Hal Perry's character had a gal pal, Flora Belle Breckenridge. Oof. Which actress, it's a name, what actress from his Gildersleeve days played the part? A. Martha Scott, B. Una Munson,
The Zoom workplace thing.
C. Shirley Mitchell, or D. Cathy Lewis?
Cancel. On it. Okay, now.
Oh, I lost my. Where did you go? I lost my list. Hold on. I minimized my list and now I can't find it. Hold on. We were on number 8 and I've got this. Okay. Just kidding. Give me just a second. Okay, so we were on number 8. So in a short-lived program, Honest Harold, Hal Peary's character had a gal pal, Floribel Breckenridge. Which actors from his Gildersleeve days played the part? A. Martha Scott, B. Una Munson, C. Shirley Mitchell, or D. Cathy Lewis? Number 9. On the radio, she was Jack's gal pal. In her real life, she was his wife. How did Jack actually first meet Mary? A. They were introduced by Gracie Allen. B. He met her at her job at the May Company department store. C. They were introduced by Zeppo Marx. Or D. He met her in a show in which they were both performing. So on the radio, she was Jack's gal pal. In real life, she was his wife. How did Jack actually first meet Mary? They were introduced by Gracie Allen. B. He met her at her job at the May Company department store. C. They were introduced by Zeppo Marx. Or D. He met her in a show in which they were both performing. D. Or let's try that again. 10. Brooksy was George Valentine's gal pal on Let George Do It. Which of the following played the part? A. Virginia Gregg. B. Frances Robinson. C. Lillian Bayef. Or D. All of the above. Brooksy was George Valentine's gal pal on Let George Do It. Which of the following played the part? A. Virginia Gregg. B. Frances Robinson. C. Lillian Bayef. Or D. All of the above. And we'll do, as always, do our answers after the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for stepping in so ably.
Oh, well, thank you.
Get us started. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
So now we're at that happy time when we move to our regularly scheduled program. And Frank would like to say a few words to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Lona Bailey. Frank, you need to unmute. There you go.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I'm pleased to welcome back tonight Dr. Lona Bailey. Lona is not only an Amazon best-selling book, but it was called Corners of the Sea, but she's a loving wife to her husband, Chris, and their 3 very active and adorable children. This will be Lona's 3rd presentation to us. Her first was about Virginia Gregg from her book Uncredited, The Life and Career of Virginia Gregg. Last year, she opened 2024 for us with a discussion about Betty Lou Gerson, who's a great favorite of mine, from her book, The Voice of Villainy, The Betty Lou Gerson Story. Tonight, Lona will discuss Cathy Lewis and her book, Mrs. Radio, The Cathy Lewis Story. So, Lona, the mic is now yours. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I always enjoy my time with you all. Thank you for asking me back. I'm tuning in from Tennessee, and we actually have snow today. It's been a cozy snow day with about 5 inches. So that never happens here. So I thought it was worth mentioning. And I have, I have a PowerPoint. You may have to help me get it started.
I've made you a co-host. Do you know how to share your screen? You hit the share screen button, which is in that whole list of videos, mutes, chat, participants, etc.
All right.
It's just a square with an arrow pointing up, and it says share.
All right, we'll see if that did it.
And you have it. There you go. Bingo.
Perfect.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you again for having me, and thank you, Frank, for that introduction. I love Cathy Lewis, and I was so glad when Frank asked me to kind of kick off this new year with a presentation on her, because she's one of my favorites. Of course, all of the radio ladies that I write biographies on are my favorites, but Cathy's story is just, it's especially interesting to me. She was a very private lady, and I respectfully did some digging and found her to be even more incredible in her personal life than perhaps what I even imagined in her professional life. So I have some information for you guys and also some really great clips from her career. So I'm sure you guys are very familiar with Cathy Lewis and her career, but just to kind of introduce some of the highlights. She was in radio for many, many years. She was, of course, was married to Elliot Lewis, and they actually had the same last name before they got married, which was interesting, and kind of a cool meeting point for them when they first got together. But Cathy began as a jazz singer, which I find really very interesting. She started with Kay Kaiser, Herbie Kay, and then Ray Noble, and then moved out to LA and got started in film and then kind of transitioned into radio, which I think probably a lot of you know. It's so wonderful to hear about musicians, folks that were really into music, and they sort of naturally transitioned into old time radio, which I think is really cool. But so a few things just to throw out initially about Cathy. Of course, on radio, she was really well known for her run on Lux, on The Great Gildersleeve, The Whistler, my personal favorite, Suspense, The Adventures of Michael Shayne, in which she played Shayne's secretary, Phyllis Knight, for quite some time. Voyage of the Scarlet Queen, which that's another really captivating one. Elliot Lewis was also on that series with her for a few episodes. And My Friend Irma. That was probably the series for which Cathy perhaps received the most acclaim. Wonderful, funny series with Marie Wilson. And of course, she was the very stoic roommate, Jane Stacy, on that series. And of course, On Stage, the show that she and Elliot produced together, and of course they performed on it together, and they also wrote several episodes. On television, she was known for TV's version, Fibber McGee and Molly. It had a pretty short run. Of course, she played Molly alongside Bob Sweeney. She also appeared on Wagon Train, Route 66, Death Valley Days, and Hazel with Shirley Booth. Cathy played this sort of holier than thou sister of George Baxter, Deidre Thompson. So that was probably one of her last TV series. And in film, these are kind of starting off with some of her early work right about the time she got into radio. The Kid Glove Killer with Van Heflin and Marsha Hunt. The Story of Molly X. That was with June Havoc and John Russell, but also Elliot Lewis was in that film as well. And The Party Crashers and The Devil at 4 O'Clock, which that's a fascinating film. I believe it was Cathy's second to last film that she was in before her death, but that was with Spencer Tracy and Frank Sinatra. Really, really interesting picture. So, Cathy was, I mentioned before, she was a pretty formidable persona. She was very, very talented, but she had a lot of stoicism, I think, in her personality. And so she really did not divulge a lot about her personal life. She was very private. And so I had to dig quite a bit what I found on her, which is okay. That's part of my job as a biographer, and lots of fun. But so to tell you a little bit about her, Catherine Lee Lewis was born December 27th, 1915 in Washington, Okanogan County, so kind of bordering on Canada. And she was born to Dr. David Hughes. He was and Eva Lewis, but Dr. Hughes was incredibly, Dr. Lewis was very well known in their county, and he was kind of a sort of a celebrity because he was known for making house calls even in the worst of weather conditions. And so he was very, very devoted as a physician, but it didn't really give him a lot of time to be a family man. And Eva, her mother, was a nurse, and that's how, they met. Cathy had a older sister, Madge, and the two of them were very into music. And so even when Cathy was like 2 and 3 years old, she would do little concerts at the movie theater in their town. And it's very, very, rural area, so there's not a whole lot of people. But she kind of became a celebrity even as a little child, partly because of Dr. Lewis, but also because of her musical ability. And so they had some moves when she was young. Her parents divorced when I guess in the 1920s, and her mother remarried, and then they moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. And Cathy would enter music contests, singing contests, and she became very comfortable on stage. She became so comfortable on stage, as a matter of fact, that she changed her name when she was a teenager. She went to a Catholic private school in St. Paul, but she kind of had this like alter ego because she was very drawn to jazz music. And so she had a stage name, Kitty Willigan. And she lied about her age so that she could be hired on at a nightclub called the Castle Royal. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Castle Royal. It has a very fascinating history. It's still there. I don't know. Sometimes I read that it's open, and sometimes I read that it's been shut down indefinitely. So I'm not really sure where it stands right now. But the building is still there. I'm just not sure if it's really active today. But it was a nightclub that was pretty shady because in the 1930s, St. Paul was kind of a stopover for a lot of the gangsters, like Al Capone, Babyface Nelson. It was kind of a mini Chicago in the 1930s. And so Castle Royal was a hub for these folks. And what was really interesting about this particular nightclub is that it's built into the side of a mountain. And so the front kind of looks like a very nice nightclub. I think I have a photo here, but behind it is everything is in a cave. And so when you would walk through the door, they would have the foyer and then a few showrooms, dining rooms. But the further back you go, you're just into a cave. And so, of course, this would be an attractive hideout for some of the gangsters, of the 30s. And it was very elegant, before you reach the cave part. It was an incredibly elegant restaurant. They had wonderful floor shows. And so Cathy, again, fibbed about her age. I think at the time she was maybe like 16. And she said, "Oh, yes, of course. I'm definitely 18 years old. I would love to work here." And she was so good that they hired her and maybe didn't ask too many questions about her age. But so she worked there for quite some time. So if you could kind of imagine this dichotomy of like Catholic schoolgirl in the daytime and then like jazz singer, with Al Capone at night, it's kind of, that's very, very fascinating dichotomy. But she was so good that she entered a contest with Herbie K. And he was kind of a famed band leader at this time. And so she auditioned. I think she beat out almost 50 other girls for a chance to be on the radio. And she won. She got a spot doing a CBS review on WCCO out of Chicago. And so that's kind of how she first got her introduction into radio, even though it was more kind of on the musical side of things. And then from there, I would imagine that the Castle Royal probably wasn't the safest place to work, especially for a young teenage girl. And so she moved out of that position and also moved into doing more music for Ray Noble. And there's a photo of him. Of course, he was very, very famous at this point, and he opened a lot at the Rainbow Room in New York. And so she got to transition, from like John Dillinger to, the Rainbow Room in New York, which I'm sure was a welcome change for her being so young. And then she had a very close relationship with Ray Noble. I talk more about that in the book. I don't know if anything really romantic ever came of that relationship, but she was certainly captivated by him. And they had a long-standing relationship until her death, as a matter of fact. But she was only with him for just a few years, and she moved to Los Angeles in 1936. And she traded her singing career. She dropped the Kitty Willigan moniker and went back to her birth name, Cathy Lewis. And then that's when she really got started in film, and then also began to dabble in little theater and finally radio, where she made her home. That's one of her first films, The Kid Glove Killer. And probably one of the first radio shows that she did, like so many others of her generation, was Lights Out. And she also moved into suspense after that, which she did so many episodes of suspense, for sure. Probably one of her best series, I think. But this is also a picture from the Michael Shane, where she portrayed Phyllis Knight, his secretary, for quite some time. Very popular series. And in 1940, she met a guy named Elliot Lewis. And it was this great talking point, because they said, we really like each other, and it's great if we get married because you won't have to change your last name. And they were complete opposites. They were, Elliot was kind of this very charming, kind of dreamer sort of persona. And then Cathy was, again, like I said, pretty stoic and very serious minded. Of course, she was very drawn to drama, and Elliot was too, but Elliot also had a comedic side, of course. And when the two met, it was a 3-year courtship, and it was one that Elliot, he really pursued her tremendously, and she ran, I think, from him for most of those 3 years, but she finally let him catch her, and they were married in 1943. And I'm sure you all know Elliot Lewis, brilliant, very dynamic force in 20th century entertainment, known as an actor, writer, director, producer. He was a native of New York and became one of the most recognized voices in radio. He began with like Hermit's Cave and the Phil Harris and Alice Faye show. Was on there for quite some time. And he did some television later on and worked on the Lucy show later in his life, but brilliant writer and not a bad actor. So they really became radio's kind of golden couple, affectionately known as Mr. and Mrs. Radio. And a little bit more, moving into, so they did some films together right after they married. And then Cathy's big break in terms of radio came in 1948 with My Friend Irma. And again, she really kind of shied away from the comedic roles, but this one was kind of dropped in her lap. And if you've read the book, or if you read the book, it was kind of a funny circumstance how she ended up auditioning for that. She said she was dragged by the hair, to audition for Cy Howard. And she was just kind of a shoo-in. Her stoicism blended perfectly with Marie Wilson's kind of ditzy persona, as Irma Peterson. And she was on that show so it ran from 1947 to 1955. And Cathy, she she was replaced briefly. I say briefly, it was for about a year. She suffered a miscarriage in 1948, and she was off the air for about a year, and she was replaced by Joan Banks. And then whenever Cathy felt like she was able to come back, Joan turned the role back over to her. And yeah, I think Cathy is probably the one that's most associated with the role of Jane Stacy, but I think Joan Banks did a wonderful job in kind of holding that part over until Cathy could come back. Because in terms of the show's success, when that happened, it was just terrible timing because that show had really, really taken off and they couldn't afford to just pull it or just kind of somehow phase Jane Stacy out. So Joan Banks was, yeah, she was wonderful to hold that place for Cathy, and Cathy always appreciated that in her. You know, she continued doing different things. She really wanted to move out of comedy back into drama. And even though she continued on like Lux and Suspense, The Whistler, she finally got the opportunity in 1953 to do her own show. And she and Elliot had said for many years, we just want to do our own thing. And so finally they were able to do that. And on stage is, I don't know if you all are familiar. I'm sure you are familiar with the episodes that are accessible. I know that not every episode is accessible today, but the ones that are just, they're just wonderful. And again, they were able to write a lot of their own shows. They were able to direct a lot of their own shows. And it's just a wonderful production. They did divorce in 1957. This was pretty shocking, I think, to a lot of folks because they had been radio's power couple for so long. And you know, they both were pretty private, and so I think a lot of folks had no idea. I mean, you would listen to them on stage, and it just sounded like they had this blissful marriage. Everything was wonderful. They got to work together, and it was really, I think, pretty shocking. Cathy cited extreme cruelty as the cause, and Elliot moved out. I think they were separated for several months before the divorce. And then not long after they divorced, Elliot married Mary Jane Croft, who she also appeared on stage some. You can hear her on a few episodes. And but I know her mostly from the Lucy Show because she was on that in later years. And then Elliot also directed some of those shows. In 1959, Cathy's father, Dr. Lewis, passed away, and this was an incredibly difficult thing for her. She had a very unique relationship with her father. He was probably the most important person in her life. He wasn't terribly emotionally available, I don't think, and she kind of set up her life in a way that seemed to, I guess, really want to have his approval, really want to have his love, and not having him was a devastating blow to her. She also, in 1965, was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent a double mastectomy, and she did not live terribly long after this procedure, although she was on Hazel, I mentioned earlier, you know, with Shirley Booth. And so she had a fairly regular role. Cathy did on the Hazel series. And, you know, if you watch that program, she seems perfectly healthy. You know, she seems fine and gave terrific performances. But she was in pretty poor health and did not live much longer after doing that series. She also, I don't know if this is, okay, must be in the other one. So another series that she did kind of in the same time period just before this, I mentioned, was Fibber McGee and Molly. So of course, we're all familiar with the radio show, the original. And so in 1959, they put together a television version with Cathy next to Bob Sweeney. And they just were not Jim and Mary and Jordan, you know, they were wonderful. They had great chemistry. It's a funny show, the few episodes that they made and are still available. But everybody just, you know, it's hard. It's hard when there's such a wonderful original and it often cannot be duplicated. And so it was only on for about a year. And I read one comment that said, a lady said, you know, I never really could buy Cathy as Molly because she was a little too glamorous. And I thought that was a really a great comment. You know, I don't know that I would have put it that way, but I can see what she means in that. So good show. And I think they meant well trying to pay tribute to the original radio series, but I don't think it really maybe worked like they wanted it to. Cathy Lewis died on November 20th, 1968 at the age of 53. And she was laid to rest in Hollywood Forever Cemetery next to her mother Eva and her sister Madge, or sorry, not next to, but very close by to them. Both of them outlived Cathy, but they ultimately were buried close by. After that, you know, Elliot Lewis, like I mentioned, he moved on to television, producing The Lucy Show and several others. He also wrote several novels before his death in 1990 at 73. And, you know, I think that, yeah, I've got a few clips here, but, you know, Cathy's career, I think she earned somewhere over 3,000 radio performances, you know, and including her roles in film and television. And I believe her to be a trailblazer of the golden age of radio. Really remembered for her resilience, her talent, and just really her classy contribution, I think, to American entertainment. This first clip is from My Friend Irma, and I'll play that now.
The Columbia Broadcasting System presents a new comedy.
My Friend Irma.
Starring Marie Wilson as Irma and Cathy Lewis as Jane, with John Brown as Al.
Friendship, friendship, just a perfect friendship. When other friendships have been forgot, theirs will still be hot. My friend Irma.
You know, friendship is a thing that's been around all through the ages. Like measles. Measles you can get rid of, but not my friend Irma. Do you know something? I never want to get rid of Irma because I sincerely love that girl. So I'm going to continue to live with her through thick and thin, although at times it's trying. Now, take, for example, when I was trying to straighten out our finances and fix up a budget for it. Naturally, I had to ask Irma a few simple questions. So I said, Irma, honey, how much money did you save last January?
None.
Well, that's silly. You worked all month. How come?
I bought a fur trim coat.
Well, how about February?
I was still paying for the coat.
In March?
I didn't pay for the coat in March.
April?
In April, I paid a lawyer for getting me out of trouble for not paying for the coat in March.
Now, honey, please be serious. We've got to work on a budget so that we won't be in the position we were in last year of having to use up all our savings in order to pay our taxes.
Jane, we won't have to pay taxes this year.
Why not?
Because my boyfriend Al says income taxes are fad and it's sure to blow over.
Al said that?
Yes, and that's why he's not going to pay any this year. Instead, he's going to use the money to buy himself a new suit.
Irma, I've got news for you. If Al doesn't pay his taxes, the government will supply him with a new suit. With stripes.
Well, I hope there'll be pinstripes. Al looks so cute in them.
Well, honey, you forget Al. You know, there are other guys in this world besides Al.
Oh, I know, Jane, and one of the boys at the office sort of has an eye on me.
Really?
So I told him I like him, but my heart belongs to Al. But that didn't discourage him.
Why not?
He said he loved me for my mind.
Believe me, Al's got a better deal.
I have one more clip, too. This one is actually from the television version of Fibber McGee and Molly, just kind of the intro here and a little clip from Cathy and Bob Sweeney.
Fibber McGee and Molly. Starring Bob Sweeney as Fibber. And Cathy Lewis as Molly.
McGee, you hardly touched your dinner.
I'm not hungry.
Would you like some dessert? I made your favorite. Lemon meringue pie with spumoni ice cream.
Not now. Maybe I'll have some for breakfast.
Ooh.
I'll give you a hand with the dishes.
Won't that make you late for your lodge meeting?
I'm not going.
Oh, McGee. Stop brooding.
I'm not brooding. Do I care if they made George Lester chairman of the dance? Do I care if they gave him the job instead of me? Do you think I really care?
Yes.
You're darn right I do. Every year for 10 years I've been waiting for somebody to jump up and say, let's make McGee chairman of the dance.
Nobody ever says it?
Only me. I wouldn't mind to resign from that lodge.
Oh, McGee. Stop being such a poor sport.
Poor sport? Just because I don't like the way I've been treated, I'd hardly call myself a poor sport.
What would you call yourself?
A sorehead. Well, I'm not really a sorehead. I just find it difficult to accept defeat gracefully. The kind of a person that you'd call a
poor sport?
Yes.
I'll do the dishes. And you go to that lodge meeting where you belong.
Excuse me. So, yeah, so I'm happy to take questions. I wrote the book. I guess the book came out in April of 2023, and it's done pretty well. I love to see when I have orders come in because, well, one, because, you know, the money's nice, of course, but two, I love when people are interested in the same icons that I am. That's a really cool feeling. And I think, oh, that's great. You know, her story was shared every time I get an order. So that always feels nice. And I happen to think she has a particularly interesting story. So yeah, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to take a few.
Well, Lana, thank you so much. That was a lovely presentation. I couldn't hear a lot of the audio. There seemed to be some playback problems. I don't know if anybody else had that problem. John may be able to clean some of that up before we post it to YouTube. But it's fascinating, and hats off to you putting this together and writing the book. It's wonderful. So I think Frank mentioned you've got a lot of your books for sale on Amazon.com.
I do, yes.
So please, everybody, feel free to rush out to Amazon as soon as this meeting is over.
Yes.
And order the book. So we can give Lana some sort of remuneration for all her work and time. Does anyone have any questions or observations or curiosities?
Yeah, I have a question. Going back to the Fibber McGee and Molly, Lana.
Yes.
Who else was considered for the part that Cathy got? Do you know?
Oh, that is a really good question. I don't know if I remember that. I don't, or if I ever even knew it, actually. I don't know. That's a really good question. I think Cathy may have been, I don't know that she was the only consideration, but I'm sure she was at the top of the list because one, I think she had the training, you know, to do that. And I think she also had the deep appreciation for the original series. And I'm sure they wanted to somehow infuse that into the TV show. And even though it wasn't terribly successful, the few episodes that remain, I think are wonderful. And I've often wondered if they had just changed the name and like the characters' names and just made it a totally different sitcom, sort of loosely based on the original, if it might not have done a bit better. I think going into it with this idea of, oh, we're doing these exact characters, I think there's always going to be some discrepancy that might overshadow whatever quality of entertainment it is, because we're always going to compare and always going to say, oh, this isn't like the original. We're looking for that original experience. But yeah, I think it was a great show. They just maybe could have changed the names and might have been on a little bit longer.
But I was going to say too, for example, when Gildersleeve came to television, it didn't last long. And I think part of it is the image that people had in their head listening to it. And now they see these people. And even though Cathy and Sweeney did a, respectable job, you have this different image in your head that you've had for these years listening to them on the radio. And, to me, that's one of the biggest problems that they had in bringing some of these early programs from radio to television. I mean, can you imagine if William Conrad had played Matt Dillon? I mean, it just wouldn't have worked.
No, not at all.
It's that image you have in your head that I think helped destroy it more than the quality of the actors.
Yes.
That was a similar situation with the famous movie actors in the days of silent movies. That when talkies came in, a lot of the careers went down the tube because the people's voice did not match up with the image that they had when they saw them on the silent movie screen.
Yes, absolutely. And with a book and a movie still, we always hear folks say, oh, the book is so much better than the movie, because again, we create these images in our minds and they're very powerful. And so I could see that for sure.
Well, and sometimes Hollywood rewrote the ending, so it wasn't in keeping with the original intention of the book. Oh, we need a happy ending.
Dr. Bailey, I have a question. A lot of your books seem to be, centered around actors, actresses, and whatnot. But I seem to have gotten an email from Amazon that you've written a book that takes place in New Orleans. Is that correct?
Yes, I have. Yes, I've somehow found myself writing fiction as well. And my agent hates that because she's like, no, you're supposed to be a nonfiction writer. That's how I'm pitching you. And now I've kind of wandered off into fiction. But I love both because with fiction, they are historical fiction, which is sometimes not terribly different than nonfiction. And so, I do a bit of both. I think I may have, so these are the titles coming up in 2025 and 2026. These are all nonfiction, but the ones at the bottom here do not have covers yet. But these are the two fiction. And so don't tell my agent about these because she doesn't like for me to talk about these. But yes, the Mistress of Death Row is set in New Orleans. And Corners of the Sea is not set in New Orleans, but it is based on a true story. And these books kind of, they lead me to each other. And so I did, let's see if I can go back. The Titanic book actually comes out. I'm not able to go back, but so I have a book on the Titanic that comes out in April of this year, and Corners of the Sea is kind of similar. And so the research I did for the Titanic led me to the story of the SS Atlantic, and so they always inform each other, and I think that's part of the fun, of the research. But yes, so I'm sort of fiction-ish, but mostly nonfiction.
Yeah, you gotta have, can't just eat vegetables all the time. You gotta have, a piece of pie and some ice creams along with it.
Exactly, yes.
Lana, I know you won't say it, but Corners of the Sea was an Amazon best-selling book, and you were right up there with James Patterson in the list, and that's quite an accomplishment to be up there with Patterson.
Thank you. Yes, that was incredibly humbling and very surprising. But it feels wonderful. I think Corners of the Sea is a fantastic story, not because I wrote it, but because it's based on a true story, and it's just very, very interesting. So yeah, I guess a lot of people connected with that, and that always feels nice.
Lona, I have to bring up to the Wasp Woman, the life, career, and brutal murder of Hollywood's Susan Cabot. Tell us about, I know there's a background with this now, and you had people in Tennessee from England and from California, right? So tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Wasp Woman.
Yes. So, yeah, if it's actually this one right here on the right, and it won't come out until 2026. But I wrote this biography of Susan Cabot, and some of you may remember her. She was kind of a starlet of the B films in the 1950s and 60s. She did a lot for Roger Corman, who recently passed away, and she was murdered by her son in 1986. And so it was, of course, this incredible shock. The media circus was unbelievable around her death. And she really just did not get a fair shake in terms of her legacy maintenance. After that, the media really had a heyday with her, and they printed and said a lot of very unfair things about her and her legacy. And so I kind of took a look at some of that and tried to reframe a lot of what they said, based more on facts than, again, this media circus at the time. And so I was able to look at autopsy reports, which I'm still having nightmares about, and look at these court documents and through her son's trial, and really fascinating research process. I'm not cut out to be, a detective or have anything to do with crime. I don't have the stomach for that. But the process was really fascinating. And so I wrote the book about it, and I self-published it. And it had been out for just a few weeks, and I was contacted by a publisher, Histria Press, and they said, hey, if you will pull this from the market and expand it, we would like to publish you. And so I did, and I've essentially doubled the size of the book and went under contract with them. And it was maybe, I don't know, 9 or 10 months later, I received a message totally out of nowhere from a Hollywood agent, and he said, I've got these folks in London, and they're making a docu-series about Susan, and they want to interview you. And I said, okay. And so we kind of went back and forth on the phone, on the email for quite some time. And then because I have 3 small children, they were very kind and said, instead of you coming to us, why don't we come to you? And so they flew from, I think 2 of them were in London, 2 of them were in Los Angeles, and they all came to Tennessee. And it was such fun. I guess they were here in November of last year. And they just set up this, there's like this whole film crew in my living room, like, it was unbelievable. And we filmed for 12 hours that day. And I was exhausted, totally wiped out. But it was so much fun and so rewarding, because this docu-series kind of has the same vision that I had, in writing the book, which is to reframe her legacy in this more positive way. Because I think media can kind of take things out of context, and certainly for the trial at that time in the 80s, there was just a lot of misinformation. And so it was really nice to partner with the folks that wanted to frame that in a better light. So yeah, that was the Wasp Woman, and that'll come out hopefully. I guess it'll come out 2026, and then I think it's later this year. Maybe this docu-series will premiere at the Sundance Festival, so that will be pretty cool. So me and my Tennessee accent will be on screen at the London Sundance Festival. So that'll be fun.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yes.
And congratulations. That's quite a saga.
Yes, thank you. It was, great fun. Great fun.
It's fun like when stuff like that just sort of happens and you weren't moving and shaking and it comes to you because of the quality of what the work you've been doing.
Yes, thank you. It's wonderful, wonderful things.
Well, I hope that you'll keep us informed on that. Of course, I'm on your Facebook, so I see a lot of this, Lona, and I'll keep the club informed as well.
Yes, thank you. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone have any other questions or curiosities?
I have a question.
Yes.
Dennis, yes.
I first encountered Cathy Lewis on the 1960s animated adventure series Johnny Quest, where for 2 episodes she voiced a character who was a mystery woman for one of the main characters, and actually she left quite an impression to fans of the show. I was wondering if she did any other voice work outside of radio work.
Yeah, I do know the show you're talking about. I think that's great. I'd forgotten about it until you mentioned that. But yeah, I don't know that she did a lot of other voice work besides radio. I know a lot of folks in her generation did. And of course, when Disney was coming out with all their awesome films, they were very natural in transitioning to a lot of the character voiceovers. Virginia Gregg, of course, she did a lot of that. Betty Lou Gerson did a lot of that. But I don't know that Cathy really did. I think, and perhaps one reason is because, at the end of the 50s and then after radio's death, I think honestly her personal life was so tumultuous that she maybe just didn't have the freedom and the energy because of her diagnosis and then recovering. I don't know that she really pursued those opportunities like some of her colleagues did. So yeah, if there are any, I am not aware of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? Well, I want to say what a wonderful program. Thank you so much. Thank you for getting us started for 3 years in a row. I mean, that's really wonderful. And you were clearly a very busy person. And in spite of having the 3 little kids and your personal life, someone one day will be writing the biography of Dr. Lona Bailey, I think.
Oh, gee, it'll be a short one, I think.
I'm not so sure. I think there will be a lot to cover. But thank you so much for agreeing to be with us tonight. This is just delightful.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you all. And I have a website too. I would love for you guys to visit it. And I would love to keep in touch. So my email is on there as well. I'm also on Facebook, like Frank mentioned. So if anyone would like to connect, I would love that too.
That's outstanding. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Now we go to the answer portion of our evening for the quiz with our substitute teacher, Miss Kraut. And do you have the answer sheet in front of you, Lauren?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right.
And you've got the answers there because you're not going to find the poll.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, let me see. Let me go back to the poll and end poll. Are we ready? Here we go.
All right.
All right, and then just share results.
Yep.
Here we go.
Ooh, there we are. Isn't that
Success. Poof.
Yeah.
All right. So I promised I had the answers, and I do. And there they are. We've got it. Okay. So, number 1, on Casey, crime photographer. Casey had a gal pal reporter named Annie. The police chief always referred to her as Miss Blank. That's the question. What was Annie's surname? And the answer was, majority rules on this one, B, Williams. Well done. I did know that one, so that's exciting. Okay, so number 2, Ellen Deering was Philo Vance's gal pal, who played Ellen in the Jackson Beck-led series. And not quite majority rules on this one. The answer is D, Joan Alexander. Yeah. All right. And number 3, Richard Diamond had a gal pal, Helen, who was attractive, wealthy, and had a Park Avenue apartment. What was Helen's surname? And it was C, Helen Asher. Well done, 61%. Number 4, Lamont Cranston only had one gal pal on The Shadow, but over the time, the part was played by 6 actresses. Who of the following never played Margot? And this is actually one of Lona Bailey's books, Virginia Gregg. And my mother actually got me that book for Christmas last year, and it's a great book. So, well done. Number 5. As editor of Big Town's Illustrated Press, Steve Wilson's gal pal and star reporter Lorelei Kilbourne was played by several actresses. Which one played the part for 10 years? And this one was pretty evenly divided between Claire Trevor, Una Munson, Fran Carlin, and Hilary Bruck. And the answer is C, Fran Carlin. Number 6, we all know that Irma was the gal pal of boyfriend Al. Jane also had a boyfriend who often bailed Al and Irma out of a jam. What was his name? And this one was, of the many Landers, we had Richard Rhinelander. Well done, 50%. Well, I do like Eric Suslander. Well done.
What about Marshlander?
They're all good ones. Well done, Frank. Dennis Day liked to remind Jack Benny that he had 2 shows. On a day in the life of Dennis Day, he had a gal pal. What was her name? And her name, I did not know this one at all, and I guessed very poorly. I chose poorly. And the answer is Mildred Anderson. No one did Tempest Storm, which is too bad. I'd like to see that show. Number 8, in his short-lived program, Honest Harold, Hal Peary's character had a gal pal, Floribel Breckenridge. Which actress from his Gildersleeve days played the part? And the answer to this one is, well done, everybody, Shirley Mitchell. On the radio, she was Jack's gal pal. In real life, she was his wife. How did Jack actually first meet Mary? And there was lots of fun things, and I'm really glad it was the one I thought it was. They were introduced by Zeppo Marx. What a great Hollywood story. And then number 10, Brooksy was George Valentine's gal pal and let George do it. Which of the following played the part? And majority rules, all of the above. So, well done, everybody.
Right. Good.
Thank you very, very much, Miss Kraut.
Most welcome.
The class seems to have behaved reasonably well.
I'll report back to Sally.
We will report back to Miss Stevens. That is wonderful. And I really appreciate it again. So thank you.
Of course.
And now we're out of our regular broadcast part of our meeting. So I will stop the recording, and then John Abbott requested that I hold up a piece of white paper so he could find that break easily, so that we don't end up publishing the public part of the business meeting, which might not be that interesting to many people. So let me stop recording.